All right, guys, so for this portion, we're going to be going over the vertebral column. All right, so our vertebral column is basically broken down into 3 types of vertebrae. We have a total of 24 vertebrae in the spine. We break them down into the cervical, the thoracic, and the lumbar. All right, so these 3 right here are part of the cervical vertebrae. So if you look at your weekly bone list that I gave you, all right, I have each of the cervical vertebrae there, as well as the ones that you need to know and the features. All right, so C1 and C2 are very distinctive and unique. And because they're distinctive and unique, we give them special names. All right, so C1 is the atlas, and C2 is the axis. All right, so C1 articulates with the occipital condyles here and here, and it allows you that movement, all right, when it articulates with the condyles for you to shake your head yes. All right, so the atlas sits directly on top of the axis, all right, and these two articulate together. All right, so we're going to go over each of these individually first. So looking at C1, all right, there's a couple of things that stand out about it. One is that if you notice, it has these foramen on each side. So in anatomical position, all right, the atlas sits like this. So this is the anterior view, and back here is the posterior view. So anterior, posterior. All right, so it sits like this in the body. So these holes that we have here, the foramen, run along the transverse plane. So they are referred to as transverse foramina. All right, and that is something that is unique to all cervical vertebrae. All right, so there's a couple of features that we don't see on the atlas, which also makes it identifiable. One is that it doesn't have a body. So a body is this large section of bone that you see on these other vertebrae right here. All right, so the atlas is like a ring or a circle. All right, so it lacks a body. All right, and it also lacks something called a spinous process. All right, so these projecting points that come off of these other vertebrae are called spinous processes, and we don't see that on the atlas. Okay, so the lack of features is one thing that helps you identify this. All right, so again, it looks like a ring. It often reminds me of the little rings that you would throw on the Coke bottles at the fair. But one of the ways in which you can identify that it is a cervical is the presence of the transverse foramina. All right, all cervical vertebrae have that feature, so it's something unique that can help you identify them. So our next vertebrae is C2, which is our axis. All right, so our axis, again, is kind of an interesting bone. All right, it's got this projection that comes off of the body. So this has a special name. It's called the dens. And the dens is unique to the axis. It is the only vertebrae that has that special feature. So the dens sits against your C1, allowing you the motion to shake your head no. So the dens stabilizes our atlas so that you have that movement capability. Now, it also has the transverse foramina because, again, it is a cervical, and that's a unique characteristic of all cervical vertebrae, all right? But another thing that it has is something called a bifid spinous process. So bifid means, or bi, excuse me,